Picture this. The sun is shining over the historic streets of Paris. The world is watching, and who do we see carrying the Olympic torch for the 2024 Games? None other than the D.O.G.G. himself, Snoop Dogg. It was a moment that felt surreal, yet somehow completely right. He was dancing, waving, and radiating a level of pure, unadulterated joy that captured the hearts of millions across the globe. But if you take a step back and really look at that image, it is absolutely mind-blowing. We are talking about a man who, just 3 decades ago, was arguably the most controversial and feared figure in American pop culture. The image of Snoop dancing through the Parisian streets with that flame in his hand is the ultimate plot twist in a career that has spanned over 30 years. You have to ask yourself, how did we actually get here? It is a journey that defies every single rule in the book of celebrity public relations. If we travel back to the early 90s, the vibe was completely different. This was not the Uncle Snoop we see today, the one who cracks jokes on nature documentaries or sells us high-end wine and comfortable sneakers. No, back then, Snoop Dogg was the personification of everything that respectable society feared most. He was the face of West Coast gangsta rap, a movement that had politicians, news anchors, and parents in a state of complete and total panic. There were literally protests held in the streets where people were crushing his albums and calling for his music to be banned from the airwaves. He was viewed as a genuine threat to the moral fabric of the country, a public enemy who represented a world many people didn't want to acknowledge. Is there any other celebrity in the history of entertainment who has managed a bigger rebrand than Snoop? It is honestly hard to think of a single one. We are witnessing a transformation that, on paper, shouldn't have been possible. We are talking about a man who went from facing a high-profile murder trial in 1993, a case that could have seen him spend the rest of his life behind bars, to becoming America's ultimate sweetheart. He went from the grit of the Long Beach streets to baking brownies and hosting hit television shows with the lifestyle queen herself, Martha Stewart. It is the kind of character arc that a Hollywood screenwriter would reject for being way too unrealistic. But that is the magic of the Snoop Dogg story. It is a complex mix of street-level authenticity, incredible musical talent, and a business mind that is sharper than most CEOs sitting in billionaire boardrooms. To understand the mogul he is today, we have to look at the foundations. We have to go back to the Long Beach neighborhoods where he was a member of the Rollin' 20s Crips. We have to look at the moment the legendary producer Dr. Dre heard a demo tape and realized he had found the unique voice that would define an entire generation. It was the birth of the G-Funk era, a sound that changed the music world forever, but it was also the start of a period defined by intense danger and legal nightmares. The Death Row Records era was not just about making hits. It was a high-stakes, often violent environment led by the formidable and controversial Suge Knight. Snoop had to navigate intense beefs, deadly rivalries, and the weight of a public image that made him a target for law enforcement and critics alike. Yet somehow he navigated all of it. He survived the beefs, he survived the trials, and he emerged on the other side, not just as a survivor, but as a global titan. Today, his portfolio includes everything from early tech investments and massive cannabis brands to a successful wine line. Before we dive deeper into the gritty details of how he built this massive empire, I want to ask you guys something. Do you remember when Snoop was considered the most dangerous man in music? Do you remember the controversy surrounding his every move in the 90s? Or are you part of the younger generation that only knows him as the funny, chill guy on TV? It is a wild shift, right? Before we continue, subscribe to the channel and tell us in the comments where you are watching from. We really want to know where our global Snoop family is tuning in from today. Stay tuned because we are about to dive into the messy, controversial, and absolutely genius moves that took Snoop from the streets to the Super Bowl halftime stage and beyond. This isn't just a story about rap music. It's a masterclass in survival and the ultimate lesson in how to flip the script on your own life. We're looking at the evolution of a man who refused to be put in a box, from the smoke weed everyday anthems to the corporate boardrooms of the elite. This is the story of how a kid from Long Beach became a global billionaire mogul and a living legend. The transition from gangsta to commercial king is just getting started, and the details are even more insane than you remember. To truly understand the billionaire mogul we see today, we have to take a trip back to where it all began, the gritty, sun-soaked streets of Long Beach, California. This wasn't a Hollywood movie set or a curated aesthetic, it was real life. And for a young Calvin Broadus, the streets were his primary education. He was deeply embedded in the culture of the Rollin' 20s Crips. An affiliation that wasn't just a phase, but a core part of his early identity. It provided the raw, unfiltered perspective that would eventually captivate the entire world, but it also placed him squarely in the crosshairs of a very dangerous and unforgiving lifestyle. Can you imagine the sheer pressure of trying to find your artistic voice while simultaneously navigating the complex, often deadly codes of street loyalty? Honestly, it is a miracle he made it out of that environment at all. The turning point came when a simple demo tape landed in the hands of the legendary producer Dr. Dre. At the time, Dre was already a titan in the music industry, but he was looking for something fresh, something that didn't sound like the aggressive, shouting delivery that was dominating the airwaves. When he heard Snoop's voice, he knew he had found something special. It was a smooth, melodic, and almost effortless flow that felt like a casual conversation over a thick, funky bass line. This was the birth of the G-Funk era, a sound that would define the West Coast for decades. When Snoop made his high-profile debut on Dr. Dre's seminal album The Chronic, the chemistry was undeniable. They weren't just making songs, they were creating a sonic landscape of lowriders and palm trees that changed the music world forever. But as the fame grew, so did the surrounding chaos. When Snoop finally dropped his debut solo album, Doggy Style, it didn't just top the charts, it shattered records and cemented him as the biggest name in rap. But with that level of global success came an incredible amount of heat. This was the absolute peak of the intense and often terrifying rivalry between the East Coast and the West Coast. Death Row Records, led by the formidable and often terrifying Suge Knight, was at the very center of this storm. The label was a fortress of power and wealth, but it was also a place where the lines between the music business and the street life were dangerously blurred. Have you ever felt like you were winning on the outside but completely trapped on the inside? That was Snoop's daily reality during the height of his early career. The darkest chapter of this era arrived in 1993 when Snoop was charged with first-degree murder following a shooting involving a rival gang member, Philip Woldemariam. It is hard to overstate just how massive this news was at the time. At the height of his musical dominance, Snoop was facing a high-stakes trial that could have seen him spend the rest of his natural life in a prison cell. The irony of the situation was chilling. His hit song and video Murder Was the Case felt like a prophetic, haunting soundtrack to his own life. Seeing him sitting in that courtroom, looking vulnerable, yet maintaining his signature composure, was a sight that the world could not look away from. He was the media's favorite villain, the public enemy that everyone loved to hate. The trial lasted for years, casting a heavy, suffocating shadow over every move he made. While he was eventually acquitted of the charges in 1996, the experience fundamentally changed him. He realized that the path he was on, under the heavy-handed and volatile management of Suge Knight, was a dead end. The atmosphere at Death Row was becoming increasingly toxic, especially following the tragic and world-shaking death of Tupac Shakur. Snoop saw the writing on the wall clearly. He knew that if he stayed in that environment, he might not live to see his 30s. His decision to eventually leave Death Row Records was arguably the most important business and personal move of his entire life. It wasn't just a standard contract dispute. It was a desperate, calculated leap for survival, leaving Suge Knight, a man known for his legendary and intimidating tactics, took a level of courage that many people don't give Snoop enough credit for today. He had to walk away from the very label that made him a superstar just to ensure he had a future. But how do you go from being the most feared and wanted man in hip-hop to a beloved commercial powerhouse? The transition wasn't immediate, and it involved some of the most bizarre and unexpected pivots in pop culture history. You won't believe how he started to change his image because the smoke was just about to get even thicker. Walking away from the shadows of Death Row was just the first step in a transformation that nobody, and I mean absolutely nobody, saw coming. If you think about the biggest brand ambassadors in the world today, you might think of legendary athletes or tech giants, but Snoop Dogg built an entire global identity around one thing: the smoke. We aren't just talking about a casual hobby here. We're talking about how he became the literal, undisputed face of marijuana culture across the entire planet. But let's be real for a second. It wasn't always just fun and games or cool music videos. This specific part of his identity caused him some massive legal headaches that would have ended anyone else's career. Can you imagine being a global superstar but getting banned from entering entire countries? It actually happened. From Norway to Australia, authorities were constantly trying to put out his fire and keep him off their soil. But Snoop just kept rolling, literally and figuratively. It's almost like the more the law tried to stop him, the more the public embraced him as this outlaw folk hero. He turned what used to be a criminal habit into a signature trait that eventually paved the way for a multi-billion-dollar legal industry. Talk about being ahead of the curve, right? But even as he was becoming the king of the clouds, the ghost of his past was still lingering in the background. The beef with Suge Knight didn't just vanish into thin air when Snoop signed a new contract elsewhere. There was real, palpable tension there for years that felt like a ticking time bomb. Suge was still a dominant, intimidating figure in the industry, and the fallout from Snoop's departure was filled with rumors of threats, legal battles, and deep-seated animosity. It was a dangerous game of high-stakes chess, but Snoop handled it with a surprising amount of grace. Instead of leaning back into the violence that defined his early years in Long Beach, he started to pivot. He realized that to survive, he had to evolve beyond the gangsta persona that had initially made him famous. This led to one of the most bizarre, confusing, and talked about chapters in pop culture history, the birth of Snoop Lion. Do you guys remember 2012? Snoop took a trip to Jamaica, spent some time with Rastafarian priests, and came back claiming he was the reincarnation of Bob Marley himself. I'm not kidding. He swapped the blue bandanas for red, gold, and green, started making reggae music, and insisted on being called Snoop Lion. People were genuinely confused. Was this a midlife crisis, a massive marketing stunt, or had he just spent a little too much time in the Jamaican sun? While many critics laughed it off or rolled their eyes, this phase was actually a brilliant display of his ability to reinvent himself. He was signaling to the world that he was no longer the man who was on trial for murder in the 90s. He was a man of peace, love, and, of course, a lot of medicinal plants. It allowed him to break out of the rigid box the media had built around him. And speaking of plants, we have to talk about the legendary gossip surrounding his lifestyle. You've probably heard the rumors that he actually employs a professional blunt roller. Rumor has it this person makes anywhere from $50,000 to over $100,000 a year just to keep the supply ready and perfect. It sounds like an urban legend, doesn't it? But Snoop has basically confirmed it in several interviews, even mentioning that his employee gets all the perks of being on tour, including free meals and luxury travel. It's these kinds of stories that moved him from being dangerous to being hilariously legendary. He also started appearing in these viral clips where he'd narrate nature documentaries with his signature slang, and the internet absolutely lost its mind. Who knew watching a lizard run away from snakes could be so entertaining when Snoop is the one doing the play-by-play? If you go back and watch his old interview clips from the early Death Row days, the difference is absolutely jarring. In the early 90s, he was quiet, guarded, and had this intense, hungry look in his eyes. He was a man navigating a literal war zone every single day. But today, he's the ultimate Uncle Snoop. He has this uncanny ability to squash almost any beef he's ever been in, which is a rare feat in the rap world. He even eventually managed to find a way to coexist with his past rivals, showing a level of emotional intelligence and maturity that most people didn't expect from a former gangsta rapper. He realized that holding on to old grudges was bad for business, and even worse for the soul. But here's the real question that keeps everyone guessing. How does a man with such a controversial, smoky reputation become the #1 choice for family-friendly brands? The pivot from being the guy parents feared to the guy your grandma wants to watch on a cooking show is a move that should be studied in every business school in the country. It wasn't an accident. It was a series of calculated genius moves that turned the dog into a mogul. We're about to see how a certain domestic queen played a huge role in that. But first, you have to realize that the smoke never really cleared. Snoop just learned how to use it to hide his next big move. The transition to becoming a commercial king was about to hit high gear, and nobody was ready for the chemistry that was about to explode on screen. The shift was starting, and the world was watching in total awe. The shift wasn't just a career move, it was a total cultural reset. Think about the sheer audacity of it for a moment. We are talking about a man who was once the face of everything wrong with society in the eyes of the media. Parents were literally organizing rallies to destroy his records. And yet, here we are today, watching him bake brownies with Martha Stewart on national television. How did that even happen? Well, it all started with a guest appearance that felt like a glitch in the Matrix. When Snoop Dogg first walked onto Martha Stewart's cooking set, everyone expected a one-time awkward gimmick. But something magical happened. You could see it. This wasn't scripted. There was genuine, palpable chemistry between the lifestyle queen and the rap legend. They became the ultimate odd couple, and the public absolutely loved it. Why did it work so well? Maybe it's because both had street cred in different ways. They both knew what it was like to be on the wrong side of the law, and they bonded over mashed potatoes and fried chicken. Their show, Martha and Snoop's Potluck Dinner Party, was a masterclass in brand rehabilitation. It humanized Snoop in a way that music videos or interviews never could. Suddenly, he wasn't the scary guy from the gritty West Coast scene with the barking dogs. He was the guy who could make a perfect quiche while cracking jokes that made Martha blush. This relationship gave him a pass into suburban living rooms. It signaled that Snoop was no longer a threat. He was a domestic darling. If Martha Stewart could invite him into her kitchen, then surely he was safe for everyone else to enjoy. It was the Martha Stewart effect, and it changed his trajectory forever. While Martha handled traditional TV, Snoop conquered the digital world. If you aren't following him on social media, you are seriously missing out on some hilarious content. He didn't hire a fancy agency, he just started being himself. Whether he was narrating animal documentaries in his Plizanet Earth segments or filming himself watching a hockey game, the internet fell in love with his vibe. Watching a rap legend get genuinely stressed out by a lizard being chased by snakes was pure comedy gold. It showed a vulnerable, funny, and relatable side that felt authentic. He wasn't playing a character, he was just living his life, and his life was hilarious. This is how the Uncle Snoop persona was born. He stopped being the intimidating young man from the 1993 murder trial and became the guy everyone wants to have a beer with at a party. He managed a rare feat, bridging the ultimate generational gap. You've got Gen Z kids who view him as a cute old man or a funny TikTok star, while boomers who once criticized him are now buying his wine at the grocery store. He is a universal constant in pop culture today. Whether he's in a Super Bowl commercial or carrying the Olympic torch through the streets of Paris, he brings a vibe of good times that transcends his past. The power of Snoop memes is huge. From his Hollywood Walk of Fame speech to his various award show reactions, he is a walking meme factory. This keeps him relevant after 30 years in the game. He realized that if you can make people laugh, they'll forgive almost anything. This non-threatening and cool uncle vibe made him the #1 choice for family-friendly brands like Skechers and Dunkin' Donuts. He successfully turned his life into a brand safe for both board meetings and block parties. But wait until you see how he turned that commercial fame into a massive business empire, because Uncle Snoop was about to become a legitimate corporate titan. The transformation was nearly complete. And the next chapter would show he wasn't just a face on TV. He was the one signing all the checks and making the big deals happen. But being the world's most lovable uncle was only one piece of the puzzle. While everyone was laughing at his cooking show, Snoop was quietly building one of the most powerful business portfolios in entertainment. The transition from dog to mogul wasn't just a PR stunt, it was a masterclass in diversification. Take the wine industry, for example. Before Snoop, how many hip-hop fans were honestly browsing the aisles for vintage red? Not many. But then came the 19 Crimes deal. Snoop didn't just sign a contract, he revolutionized how a whole generation perceived the drink. By putting his face on Snoop Cali Red, he made wine accessible and cool. He turned a stiff industry into something you could enjoy at a BBQ while listening to G-Funk. The results: millions of bottles sold and a brand that became a household name. He didn't stop there. Snoop has a keen eye for the future. He was an early tech investor long before it was the trendy thing for celebrities to do. Did you know he was an early backer of Reddit or the cannabis giant Ease? While traditional investors were skeptical, Snoop saw the potential in digital communities and the green rush long before laws shifted. Speaking of the green rush, we can't ignore his cannabis empire. With Leafs by Snoop, he became one of the first major celebrities to launch a mainstream marijuana brand. He took his passion and turned it into a sophisticated business that paved the way for the legal industry we see today. He isn't just a consumer, he's a pioneer who saw the corporate potential in the culture he helped build. He turned smoke into gold. Then came the move that brought tears to the eyes of hip-hop fans. In 2022, the story came full circle. Snoop Dogg officially acquired Death Row Records. Can you imagine the feeling? After decades of drama and a rocky departure from Suge Knight's leadership in the 90s, Snoop finally became the owner of the label that started it all. He went from being a young artist to the man who owns the brand's history and master recordings. This wasn't just a deal, it was a spiritual victory for the culture. It allowed him to bring the label into the modern age, exploring NFTs and signing a new generation of talent under that iconic logo. It's the ultimate boss move, buying the company that once owned you. To celebrate, he took to the world's biggest stage, the Super Bowl LVI halftime show, performing with his mentor Dr. Dre in Los Angeles. Snoop wore a blue bandana tracksuit and reminded the world that while he's a businessman now, he's still the king of the West Coast. That performance was a global victory lap. Since then, brand partnerships have only gotten bigger and more unexpected. From Skechers to Dunkin' Donuts to Petco, Snoop can sell anything to anyone. It works because he is authentic. We believe him because he's always himself. Today, he sits atop an empire worth hundreds of millions of dollars. Is there anything this man can't sell? He has proven that his charm is universal, and his business sense is as sharp as his rhymes. He's moved beyond the music charts and into global corporate boardrooms where the real power lies. He's a titan of industry who can pivot from a board meeting to a recording studio without ever losing his cool. He's managed to monetize his entire existence, turning his hobbies, his habits, and his persona into a multi-generational wealth machine. But the crazy part is, he's still not done. With his net worth climbing and his influence reaching new heights, you have to wonder, what's left for a man who has already conquered the world? He has sold everything from vegan burgers to diamonds, proving that the Snoop Dogg brand is indestructible. The blueprint is set, and the legacy is cemented in gold. He's no longer just a rapper, he's a living, breathing economy, and everyone is waiting to see what the Dogfather does next. Looking back at this incredible journey, we realize that Snoop Dogg hasn't just survived the game, he completely rewrote the rules. We're talking about the ultimate Snoop Dogg blueprint for career longevity, and honestly, it's something they should be teaching in business schools across the country. How do you stay relevant for over 30 years in an industry that moves faster than a TikTok trend? You evolve, you adapt, and you never ever lose your cool. Snoop showed the world that you don't have to stay in one box. You can be the young man from the Rollin' 20s Crips who survived a high-stakes murder trial, and also be the guy who bakes delicious brownies with Martha Stewart on national television. It's all about that authentic vibe, right? People can tell when you're faking it, but with Snoop, what you see is what you get, whether he's performing on a stage in front of 80,000 screaming fans or just chilling in his backyard narrating nature videos. But what exactly does the future hold for the Dogfather? If you think he's ready to retire and just spend his days in a cloud of smoke, you clearly haven't been paying attention to his hustle. Snoop is just getting started in the world of sports and film. We all saw his legendary performance as a commentator and torchbearer during the 2024 Paris Olympics, right? He was basically the MVP of the entire games without even being an athlete. He's proven that he has a future in global broadcasting that could last another 20 years. And let's talk about that upcoming biopic that everyone is buzzing about. The rumors are true. A major motion picture about his life is officially in development with major studios. Can you imagine the scenes? Seeing the 1993 trial, the explosive death row glory days with Dr. Dre, and his rise to billionaire mogul status on the big screen. It's going to be a cinematic event that cements his place in pop culture history forever. He's already paved the way with his Snoop Youth Football League, helping thousands of kids find a better path. That's the kind of legacy that matters way more than any platinum record or diamond chain. Now that he officially owns Death Row Records, the mission has shifted from survival to expansion. He isn't just looking back at the past with nostalgia, he's looking for the next big superstar to carry the torch into the future. He wants to sign the next generation of talent, but this time, he's doing it as a boss who actually cares about the artist's well-being and ownership. He's merging the old-school West Coast grit with new-school technology, exploring gaming and digital spaces like a true tech visionary. It's a full-circle moment that feels like the ultimate spiritual victory. He went from being a young artist who felt trapped by a dangerous contract under Suge Knight to being the man who owns the entire legendary catalog. That is the definition of a boss move, and it proves that patience really is a virtue. Is Snoop Dogg the most successful rebranding case study in marketing history? It's hard to argue against it. He managed to turn his entire lifestyle into a global brand that everyone, from your little brother to your grandma, actually loves and respects. Whether you're seeing his face on a bottle of 19 Crimes wine or watching him joke around with Martha Stewart, he's a living, breathing economy and a constant reminder that where you start doesn't have to be where you finish. He navigated the most treacherous and deadly era of hip-hop and came out the other side as America's favorite and most lovable uncle. So we have to ask you guys, which era of Snoop is your absolute favorite? Are you a fan of the 90s gangsta vibes, or do you prefer the 2020s business mogul who's taking over the world one deal at a time? Let us know in the comments because we want to hear your favorite Snoop memories. As we wrap up this final part of our journey, remember the lessons from the Dogfather himself. Stay true to your roots, keep your eyes on the prize, and always, always keep it player. It's been a wild ride from the streets of Long Beach to the lights of Paris, and something tells us the best is yet to come. Thanks for riding with us through the life and times of a true legend. Keep those vibes high, stay smooth, and as the man himself would say, peace, love, and hair grease. We out!